So first, I just want to do a quick introduction. My name is Kathy Holland. I'm a business development manager at Digital Science. And I'm going to run through just kind of what we'll cover today, and then just give you a little bit of altmetric background, just in case anybody on the call doesn't have it. So after I speak, I'm going to jump over to Lily Troia, who's the engagement manager at Altmetric, and she's going to talk a little bit about publisher workflows and books data within those workflows. Then we are going to get an author perspective from Amy Earhart, who's an author and associate professor at Texas A&M. And then after that, we're going to jump over again and hear Martijn and Agata speak on different ways they're using altmetric data in kind of Springer Nature's books program. So just to give you a little bit of quick background, I wanted to touch on the altmetric mission, which is really to track and analyze online activity around scholarly research. And I also like to just touch on, for anybody that doesn't already know, what are altmetrics? And it's kind of exactly like the word sounds, alternative metrics. I think there are definitely kind of traditional metrics in the space, but with the rise of the digital age, there's a lot more we can do and a lot more information we can collect. And this has given rise to altmetrics, which gives you a broader picture of things. And this is just kind of a quick smattering in terms of what is tracked by Altmetric. You've got everything from social media to blogs to policy documents, news, etc. And of course, it collects all this information and puts it together in a nice graphic visualization called the Altmetric donut. And I think one question that often comes up is, why are they needed? And I touched on this, maybe a slide ago, where with the rise of the digital age, there's a lot more information out there we can collect. And especially in the book space, I think something like altmetrics are even more exciting because you can start to get a sense of what's going on with your piece of content and who is talking about it. And so that's very exciting, and I don't think something that has existed as easily in the past. And I wanted to just quickly go over, the 3 altmetric tools that we have in the publisher space, mostly because our speakers, as we go into this, are going to be touching on these various tools. So I wanted you to have a good idea of what they are. And the first, I think a lot of people are familiar with, it's the Altmetric badge, which is available for books and journals. I really see this as a reader engagement tool and an author service. These badges go on your content pages, and so they're definitely external facing. The next tool that we offer is the Altmetric Explorer, which is kind of a reporting tool, which is definitely internal. And it allows you to run a variety of reports to, track influence, run searches, get email alerts, report to stakeholders, and things like that. So it gives you a quick snapshot of all of your data and information. And the last thing I just kind of wanted to touch on was the Altmetric API, which gives you access to all of Altmetric's data, and then you can kind of take it and slice it up and put it back together in your own way. And that's, I think, kind of the last one. And at this point, we can definitely dive more into the information. I promised I wouldn't make this long. So I am now going to pass this over to Lily Troia, who is the Altmetric Engagement Manager.
Hi, everybody. This is Lily Troia. I am a digital scholarship librarian, and I have been working as engagement manager at Altmetric for, well, a little over a year now. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I work with all of our existing clients to really help them maximize altmetric data and to understand, how you can make it work for you. And books data is really exciting because it gives us this understanding of really looking at different audiences and attention trends that can provide us with a lot of rich data. And one of the things I really like to think about in terms of altmetrics and books specifically is this idea that it's more about engagement, right? It's not just a bookmark or even a download or a page hit. We're really looking at interaction across unique outlets, things like Wikipedia, patent references, global policy mentions, syllabi, etc. So we can see, again, this really deep level of engagement that's going on with your publications. And currently we have a lot of really rich book attention data that are tracked via Altmetric and that are accessible through the Explorer platform to do aggregate analysis. Currently there's over 900,000 books and chapters with attention in the Altmetric Book Index, which reflects around approximately 50 plus publishers and aggregators. And that's 2.9 million plus mentions of scholarly books. And the screenshot you see was a snapshot I took last night. So this is a breakdown of all the different sources of attention related to conversations around scholarly monographs. So really, really rich data from news, policy, again, patents, social media, all these different audiences. I also just wanted to mention a particular issue for tracking monograph altmetric attention, of course, is the fact that often people are sharing these links and data not from the publisher landing page. They're sharing them via Amazon or Google Books. And our team was well aware of this. And last year they came up with an algorithm basically to capture that attention. So when research publications, monographs are shared via Amazon, when someone shares that on Twitter, we can capture that data as well. And I leave this initial snapshot information up because what I think was really interesting is, in addition to all that social media mentions, of course, we expect people, members of the public, people who are buying those books potentially to be coming via Amazon. But there were global policy sources, news, blogs that were using Amazon book links as their reference and their citation. Very irksome as a librarian, probably to those of you in publishing as well, but we're really excited that we're able to capture that data because there's so much rich ways that you can inform your practice and your role at the publishing organization that you work at. We see publishers using Altmetric data as an author service. Authors, as we'll hear from Amy, can really come to rely on this information to provide them with evidence of richer types of attention and impact that maybe they can't get from citations alone. Many authors now do really, again, expect to see this data available to them. We can track the engagement and reach of your books and chapters, of course, but you can also track the engagement and reach of other publishers' books and book chapters. And the ability now, or the tendent pattern we have now where DOIs are assigned at the chapter level, gives us this really great capacity to understand when even components of monographs are being shared in different audiences and ways. Being able to demonstrate the influence back to funders, management, administrators, et cetera, informing editorial and commissioning work, marketing strategies. I just spent a bunch of time over in the UK meeting with various publishers who are working in books and specifically using Altmetric data to make sure that they have a richer picture of information when they're going about the commissioning process. And then finally, actually, something that I learned working with Springer Nature when I was out in Dordrecht at the office, where you'll hear from some colleagues later, was this ability to stay on top of research integrity issues, reputation management, really make sure that you know about anything that emerges quickly in conversations around your publications, before you would have a delay, say, in getting contacted about that. And this gives us this great ability to uncover, current diverse engagement with our books. We can see here an example where we've got very targeted blogs, a Reddit thread discussing this, climate-related social media conversations. This a Reddit or a Wikipedia citation has been updated. Each of these mentions themselves represent a unique audience and a unique conversation that's happening around a scholarly monograph online. And then also we have this really added data that can reflect, broader influence, patent, intellectual property, policy mentions, et cetera. This was just a quick example that I pulled from MIT Press to use today. So this publication, this book, has a score of 98, which is our aggregated weighting of how much attention it has received. And included in those different sources of attention is this policy mention, where this book was referenced in an Economic Policy Institute report. Really, again, examples of targeted translational impact potentially. Publishers are really looking at patents also for things like creating thematic collections, promoting industry uptake to authors. Again, you can look at the things you've been publishing over time and use this data to understand how maybe you can create new products going forward. The questions that I get asked a lot when I work with clients are really focused on, fostering this high value engagement. And I think one of the things that you should do is really start from some questions. Who is currently sharing and discussing your books? This is the kind of information that you can quickly get through Altmetric data. And then in turn, run a gap analysis. We track 16 sources of attention, for example. They might not be of all equal value to you, but you can understand which audiences you haven't reached yet and figure out strategies to make sure that you can reach those audiences. Because you have access to our entire database, if you're working in the Explorer, you can look at other publishers' publications, for example. The details pages are all public facing and freely accessible also. So anyone can look at that information of who's sharing another book that's coming out of another publishing house or press. Now, this bullet point maybe should go first, but I just really like to encourage folks to take a step back and think about what publication success and impact is for them at your organization, within your department, within your role. And are there attention sources, altmetric data points that align with those goals? I would bet there probably are. Mentions in syllabi, informing future research, understanding what you want in terms of impact for your monographs, I think is a really good starting point. And then finally, where can you incorporate this data into existing workflows? Are you already doing citation analysis or some sort of impact assessment? Are you working in a marketing or promotions capacity where you're benchmarking social media activity or outreach conference participation? Taking this data and putting it into these regular workflows already will really, I think, help you see it as part of this richer picture to complement and inform the work that you do. And then finally, just think about other departments as well. So if you're coming from an editorial standpoint or you're commissioning, are there other folks at your organization that might also find benefit for this data? I really think Altmetric data can help inform the entire publication process, from that initial idea and thought and strategy, to that assessment afterwards. And then I want to hand it over to, our great presenters today, but just a couple screenshots and examples of ways that different publishers are sharing information about Altmetric and Altmetric data. Again, specifically for books, Taylor and Francis has an author services page. It's really been a feedback and engagement driver for their authors. We're working with them right now on a pilot program to discuss how we can inform commissioning activity and other editorial decisions, and also just this marketing tool and value added feature. I, as a librarian, go to a lot of conferences and I see publishers advertise the fact that they offer Altmetric data as part of their products because they know that librarians and authors, administrators, et cetera, see this as a really important value. And it's a really great opportunity for you to be able to showcase as well. We can see examples of, the mentions directly on your landing pages if you want to have them there, so people can understand the kinds of interactions that are happening, and again, engage with new stakeholders as well. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to the rest of our team. And as mentioned, we can handle questions at the end, and we're very much accessible to answer any additional questions as well. Let me just go over here, and I'm going to mute myself. And Kathy, are you going to go ahead and announce and switch it over?
Yes, sorry about that. Having a little trouble here. So next we're going to hear from Amy Earhart from Texas A&M, and she's going to give us kind of an author and institutional perspective. So let me just share with her, and then we should be good to go.
I just did it. She's got it.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lily.
Great. Just making sure you can't see my presenter screen, right? You can just see the regular slides?
We actually are seeing presenter mode, yeah.
Darn. Okay, we'll do it this way. All right, how's that?
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm Amy Earhart. I am at Texas A&M University and work within the fields of digital humanities and critical race studies. And before I start, I want to take a little step back and just remind you all, especially coming from a humanities perspective, that there's a lot of metric nervousness that I think we need to attend to as we move forward with discussions of altmetrics with faculty. As you know, I'm sure the AAUP has released a statement on the problems with academic analytics and research metrics in general. And while I think the sciences are much more comfortable with metrics, I think you have to remember that the humanities in particular are going to be very anxious about metrics because, in all honesty, they're not very good for us. And just to kind of give you a little background on why traditional metrics don't work, and why altmetrics sometimes are a really good choice, especially for humanities, is that citation scraping generally for us is only in digital forms. And even more important to this discussion, essay collections and books are unlikely to be indexed in things like academic analytics. Also, the way traditional metrics are constructed often emphasizes a science perspective on scholarship longevity. And by that I mean there's an idea in the sciences that after a few years, your papers basically are done and new discoveries have occurred, and therefore we don't need to look beyond a certain date at citations. Whereas in the humanities, we are really interested in longevity. Books that have been cited over a period of 20 and 30 years, we know are foundational to the field. And altmetrics can help you with this because you're just not going to pick that up in traditional metrics. And finally, as we've discussed, many journals and presses just aren't interested. And just to give you a quick overview of how I've found problems with our traditional metrics that altmetrics might help to inform, here's the Web of Science, which is traditionally considered a really great citation index. And as you notice, this particular article is cited, according to them, 12 times. We do a little better with Google Scholar, but actually when I've hand indexed this, sorry, I just have, apologies, it's the dog at the neighbors. Let me see if I can move a place that's a little quieter. So when I've hand indexed this, it's very clear that it's over 100 citations. So this idea of indexes that are traditional really needs to be informed by what altmetrics can do. So let's get into sort of the crux of how one might use altmetrics. We've often talked about in our department of taking back our metrics. And by this, I mean that you have to educate your faculty and have a discussion of scholarly index, which I think Lily just mentioned, and also to use a variety of tools, including altmetrics. Finally, you need to create an individual narrative, and I want to talk about each of these briefly. So educating faculty is really crucial, particularly in humanities fields where people are necessarily going to be skeptical of the metrics. And also how we define impact is really important. You need to have a departmental workshop. You need to think about coalitions to do so. And I've found that there's some good sources out there to help on this. One of the best practices for scholarly metrics impacts are things put out by our library. Our ScholComm person at the library has been really, really good about helping with this. And as we move forward, the other thing, once you've worked on educating your faculty, you need to think about tools and beyond the traditional citation indices. So for us, we've been very fortunate that we've worked both with our library and with our presses to be able to come up with metrics that are very clear and transparent to our faculty, that they don't have to go search for them. Here's, I think you saw this in Lily's, a screenshot of the University of Michigan, which is my publisher. They've all went ahead and added these particular badges to our books, which has been really great. Now, again, I want to remind us that even these kind of metrics miss a lot of things. So it's really important that one goes in and looks at these particular metrics and think, that you think more broadly about how you want to create your individual narrative. And we found 4 really productive ways in our department to do so. These are the 4 ways. I want to walk us through each of them, but briefly: citations of work and scholarship outside national boundaries. That was a real crucial piece for us. It was part of our institutional charge, so we thought Altmetrics would help with that. We wanted to see if we could use Twitter conversations at conferences as a way to measure the impact of our work. Also, that publications, to help scholars look at the kinds of publications they're using and seeing if those publications are actually generating interest in use. And finally, to track scholarship in the classroom, which is a key component of a land-grant institution, we want to be able to reflect that. So let me just briefly show you how we've used this type of work. When we did our annual report in the English department, we had every faculty member go in and pull citations and look by region. We wanted to see if people were moving outside of the Americas and North America context in particular. And these kinds of altmetrics can really help us prove that that is the case. When you drill down into the altmetrics, you can get even more specific. So these are just 2 tweets that came out about my recent book, one by a Greek scholar and one by a Japanese scholar. So I could point to them and say, hey, look, yes, this book is resonating beyond the Americas. We really are having this kind of global impact. The other thing we wanted to do is see if our work was getting any play at conferences. Conferences are notoriously difficult to track in the humanities, other than to say, yes, you've given a paper at a big conference that's important to our field. But by using this type of plot, you can actually see my book was released in 2015, and what you see are spikes at all the regular meetings. That each of these, when you drill down into the data, you see that there's been discussion at our national and international meetings in the field. So that's a really helpful metric that can be used by faculty. You also can use this information to figure out which publications generate interest. And while this seems to be a somewhat of a low score, what shocked me about this, it says in the top 25 of all research outputs, you know, this was sort of one of the higher marked articles. It shocked me because I really thought this journal was a throwaway and it was not going to do much of anything. I just kind of was invited. I thought, yeah, okay, we'll put it out there. And I've seen this over and over again, that assumptions that I have made and other colleagues have made about certain venues are actually incorrect. I saw this very early on with my Debates in Digital Humanities collection, which has become a seminal piece in the field. But our field tends to devalue essay collections, and I could show that that particular collection was among the most cited in the entire field. So this is how altmetrics can help authors target materials. And finally, we mentioned the use of scholarship in the classroom. Particularly things like blog assignments, which happen a lot in our field. It's hard to locate those, that if someone has a student read, say, an essay and then blog about it, it's sometimes hard to find those, but altmetrics will allow you to locate those and see where your works are being used in the classroom. And that's really important to both our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of the field. So briefly, you know, when I think about altmetrics as a faculty member, as someone who's in the humanities, I tell those that I talk to, make sure your faculty are educated, know how metrics are constructed, both traditional and altmetrics, dig deep, and then create an individual narrative. These are all crucial. Thanks a lot.
All right, well, thank you, Amy. I think I've definitely learned a couple of things. So now I'm going to pass this on to Martijn, who is the head of publishing innovation at Springer Nature. Let's see. All right. Martijn, is this?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, great. So I'll let you pull up what you need and please take it away.
Okay. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Very good. So now we have already a long, let's say, history with Altmetric. And I think our history with Altmetric started actually with a couple of, you know, experiences that I had. So the first one was when I was a publishing editor. I would be talking to potential authors, and they would say to me, I have no idea what the impact of my book is. I don't get any recognition, neither from faculty, university, or funders. This is a couple of years ago. So why would I write one? At the same time, also, as already mentioned also by the previous speakers, the research dissemination channels changed quite a bit over the past couple of years. And so we now have, beyond scholarly citation, also social media mentions and non-scholarly citations, news, policy documents, blogs, patents, and article usage. And that is a lot more than we think. So here's some data that I kindly borrowed from Altmetric, where they showed that a research output is mentioned every 2.8 seconds. So while I've been talking, there have been already many articles discussed online. And if we look at the broader picture, and this is all the scholarly content, there's 23 million social media shares, 1 million Wikipedia, and I think my favorite one is the 26,000 public policy references to scholarly works. So this all illustrates that there's really a lot of online discussion around scholarly content. Now, with these two notions, we came together, as you do when you start something great, in a London pub at this table, and we sat down and we developed something what was later called Bookmetrics. Now, Bookmetrics pulls together the information paid to, use of, impact of books, and these books, as you now should already know, benefit hugely from these new ways of attention and impact. And one of the data sources that we have is basically the Altmetric data for the books. And although it looks slightly different on our website, it's still all it all contains the Altmetric data in addition to citation data, download, and book review data on all the main platforms that we have. We've created a special page for each of the books and each of the chapters where the authors can see how many times their book has been cited, how many times it's been downloaded, the online mentions. We also added some benchmarking, so the numbers become more tangible. I mean, what does it actually mean that you have 10,000 downloads? Is that good or not? If you really want to dive into the details, you can click on the boxes and you can see who's been tweeting about you and who has been citing your book. I lost my mouse. Oh, here we are. Good. Now, we've also added a couple of services, in particular for the authors, that help us to give them a better understanding of their books, but also help them to advocate to their university that their book really made an impact. So the first one is that we added a institutional identifier to all of our books. So we use Grid, a digital science product. It's one of the identifiers similar to Ringgold, and I'm sure there's many others. But it helps us, as you can see later on, also to bring our data nicely together. Now this one we developed in particular for the book authors. And so they can create a report of their book, including all the key metrics. So the citation data, the Altmetric data, as you can see here, the Mendeley data, and the downloads. It's a PDF that they can easily download. It has a timestamp. You can tweak it, as I did here in this case. And you can send it off to your university or to your funder. For the really eager authors, we also developed a service where we will give them a monthly update of their book. That will tell them how many times the book has been mentioned in social media, or on the blogs, in the news, etc. Whether it's been cited and where it's been cited, and how many downloads you had in that particular month. So in this case, for the month of June of 2017. Now, in addition to the book pages, we also have an in-house platform which is very comparable to the Altmetric Explorer. And just to give you also an idea how powerful the books and how alive the books are still, this is an exercise I did in January of 2017. And I was very curious what now the immediacy index of books are. Here you see the top cited books and the top mentioned books. And just to be sure, this is the impact of the books only 1 year maximum after publication, or even less. And even though you can't read the numbers, and I apologize for this, but it goes from 88 citations to 49, and from 900 altmetrics down to 300. And if we look across our entire portfolio on an annual basis, in 2016, 11,000 books. We had 25% of these books had been cited once or more, and 42 has been mentioned online. So they had one or more altmetrics. So really quite a staggering number, and an indication that the books are very much alive and used in academia. Zooming in a little bit on the Altmetric side of things, why do people mention a book online? Well, one reason is that it is an open access book, and my colleague will tell you a lot more about that. Another reason is, for example, the microarray book. This is a very community-driven biomedical technology. And every time a new book appears, you'll see a lot of, someone will tweet about it, and you see this has nearly 300 retweets. So very much a community that is driving something, and then it's adopted and spreads the word. Or it's a sort of a primary research. So this is the preceding books that we also publish, the lecture note in computer science. And in this case, there was a nice a pattern recognition algorithm that could morph a given movie into something along the lines of the input. In this case, the input was a prehistoric drawing in the corner, which was morphed onto the Ice Age movie. And you see many news outlets spoke about that, including the movie, but also blogs and Facebook and Twitter. So just a cool piece of research, actually. Now, if we look in the Altmetric Explorer for the book section, and we look at the class of 2017, so the books published in 2017, again, only 1 year after publication. This is the score of all the books that we have right now. Maybe it's already been increased. I took this last month. And you can see actually books are also mentioned quite a lot in the news, blogs, staggering amount on Twitter, patents, peer review, video, Q&A, basically the same as where journal articles are being discussed. One of my favorite, as I already mentioned before, is the policy documents. You see that even books are mentioned or cited in policy documents and actually make a change on society. I recently made a road trip to Japan to talk about the impact of books. And actually using the Bookmetrics platform, but likewise with the Altmetric Explorer, you can do these kind of nifty kind of things. So we can bring the data back together because we know the grid, the institutional identifier, and subsequently we know the country where they were authored from. So these are books that are authored from Japan, and you can see the top cited book, top reviewed book, and the top mentioned, reviewed, and cited books. And you really get, as a publisher, a much better grip on your portfolio, the performance of your portfolio, the high flyers, the low flyers, and yeah, work on that. You can download the data and analyze it further, but also you can find which are now the top institutions that author for Springer Nature books, and we find on position 21 the University of Tokyo in this case. Going back also, social science was already mentioned earlier. Coincidentally, I was visiting one of the social science universities in Japan, and so I pulled this data set out of the Bookmetrics platform, and you can see that actually the books that were authored from Japan had on average a slightly higher number of Altmetrics than the general portfolio. So social science wise, Japan is doing quite great. And last but not least, you can even zoom in on Kyoto, on specific universities. And so our sales teams help the librarians to provide a better insight in the books that are authored from their university. So for example, here, Kyoto University, and the number of books over the years that are authored by people from Kyoto University, as well as averages or what have you. So with that, I'd like to thank you. I think for us, it's been a hugely useful tool to provide a much better insight in the way that books perform, and we hope to learn more. That's it.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Martijn. So now we are going to go over to our last presenter, Agata, and she is working in the Springer Nature Open Access Books program. Let's see. All right, Agata, I have just made you the presenter. Can you just confirm that you've got everything? And don't forget to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, and can you also see my presentation?
Yes, I think we're all set. Let's keep going.
Okay, absolutely fantastic then. Okay, so let me start. First of all, my name is Agata Morka. I work as Senior Manager Open Access Books at Springer Nature. And today I will tell you a little bit about how we tried to measure the impact of open access on books. Let me start with a short story. So funny enough, when I was preparing myself for this webinar, I got a message from a very good friend of mine who sent me this particular picture. And to be honest, I was a little bit puzzled as to what this was actually showing, until I discovered that this is actually a picture taken in a stairwell of his office where someone put together a small exhibition about graphic design. And to my great surprise, or rather to my great horror, I discovered that there is a quote on a wall. So someone took a part of an article that I wrote a long time ago in my previous life as a researcher in art history and put it on a wall. And I thought that in a wider discussion of metrics, about alternative metrics, about appropriate metrics for researchers, I found it to be quite hilarious. I personally think that being quoted on the wall should count double, but that's also, of course, only a hilarious little addition in this otherwise very serious discussion about metrics and how they can be used and what they can actually show. And last year I spent a lot of my time looking into book metrics and looking into how we can show that open access have impact on your book performance. So since I work at Springer Nature, that was a perfect environment to perform an analysis that would compare OA books versus non-OA books. We have a significant portfolio of both open access books and traditional books, and we have been publishing open access books for quite some years now. Springer was actually among one of the pioneers of this of a new open access model for books. Let me tell you just a little bit about our open access books program here at Springer Nature. We pretty much cover all subject areas, and it's possible to publish any book type with us, from monographs to edited collections, proceedings. We also have short form books, so-called Springer briefs and Palgrave pivots, and we can also open individual chapters in otherwise closed books. We are very liberal when it comes to the Creative Commons license that we use. We use CC BY, so the one that allows readers to reuse this content without any commercial restrictions or without any restrictions when it comes to derivatives. All of our e-versions are made available OA, and every single open access book is accompanied by a print version. So far, we have published more than 500 titles. So we have this. These 500 titles. They're all open access. So we set these books free via open access, and then does it actually make a difference if a book is open access or if it's not, and what kind of difference, what kind of impact open access might have on its performance? So these questions that we had served as a point of departure for the analysis that we performed last year, and based on this analysis we published a white paper called the Open Access Effect. So what we looked into was actually we were looking into two sets of metrics. So first of all, of course, we looked into quantitative metrics where we analyzed usage, citations, and online mentions of both OA books and non-OA books, and we compared them. But then we also felt that, of course, those quantitative metrics, they only tell half the story. So we were also looking into more, let's say, human metrics, and we interviewed both authors and funders to understand better what their motivations were when they choose to publish open access, what their experiences were so far, and what kind of effect of OA they see on their books, if they saw any. Today, however, I will focus on the first part of our analysis, so on this quantitative part, to show you which metrics we used and how we used them and how they helped us assess the impact of OA on books. So first of all, which metrics did we use? We looked into downloads, and for downloads, we used our own platform, Springer Link, and open access books were benchmarked against non-open access books published in the same subject area and the same month. We analyzed a total of 216 open access books versus more than 17,000 non-open access books. And the reporting period for downloads ran for 4 years. We started in August 2012 up till July 2017. So we looked at the first 4 years of each book's life. When it comes to citations and online mentions, we used book metrics, which you heard so much about from Martijn. So this is a Springer Nature tool, and it helped us look into usage, readership, and readership of open access books. In this particular case, for citations and online mentions, we compared OA titles versus non-OA titles published in the same year. So, what have we discovered? Because I think that it's quite fascinating what came out of this rather meticulous analysis here. So, first of all, about downloads. We were hoping to show that open access has a positive impact on publications, and indeed, when you look at the downloads figures, I think that the data confirms this rather popular assumption that open access could possibly increase the number of downloads and citations. So, as you can see, OA book downloads remain consistently higher than non-OA books downloads in each of the first 4 years after publication. And you can see that OA book downloads peak on publication with 15.5 times as many downloads as for non-OA books within the first 6 months, and then decreasing over the remaining 4 years of the study period. Open access books, they tend to be a little bit more extreme when it comes to metrics and their behavior here. And you can say that the rate of downloads for non-OA books is steadier over the 4 years. It's steadier than that of OA downloads. Of course, these downloads also, these averages, they differ per discipline. So we looked into different subject areas. And if you want to know more about this, I would very much encourage you to read the entire report, where you can see how these differ per disciplines. Here you have 4 main clusters that we analyzed. So we have humanities, social sciences, and law. Then you have business, economics, finance, engineering, medicine, and biomedicine. On average, we discovered that OA books had 7 times more downloads than non-OA books. And what about citations? So as I mentioned, citations were tracked via book metrics. And for this part of the analysis, we made comparison between OA and non-OA titles published in the same year. And as you can see here, there's a large increase in citations from the first to the second year of a book's life for both OA and non-OA books, which was somewhat, I think, predictable. When you look at it a little bit closer, you will see that citations peak in the 4th year for both OA and non-OA books. However, without data over a longer period being available, it's not clear yet whether this is the overall peak or whether that could change still. OA books, again, are a little bit more extreme, and you can see a sharper growth in citations between the 1st and 2nd year compared within the 2nd and 3rd year, where the numbers of citations holds steady, more or less. Again, non-OA books are a little bit steadier here, and they show a steady rate of growth year on year. We were, of course, wondering, is there a relationship between downloads and citations? However, we have not established any sort of correlation between downloads and citations. Having said that, we observed a common trend. So books are mostly downloaded within the 1st year of publication, but of course, as one might expect, again, there is a delay in citations as they build up over time, with older books receiving more citations. And of course, where there is a higher level of downloads for OA books in year 1, a higher level of citations is subsequently observed by year 4. It might be a result of more readers having access to a title, given the pattern of citations shown over the 4 years, which suggests that readers are first downloading a book, then taking time to read, digest, and perform further research before citing it. When it comes to online mentions, because we also looked at them, for the first 3 years, an OA book is mentioned on average of 40 times, and that means 10 times more than a non-open access book. So conveniently so, the data matches our expectations. So what we discovered here is that on average, open access books have 7 times more downloads. They are cited 50%, they have 50% more citations than non-OA books, and they are mentioned on average, again, these are all averages 10 times more than non-OA books. And this is what we discovered, and how do we use this data in our sort of day-to-day experiences. So as I mentioned, this analysis had another part, which was where we interviewed both authors and funders about their expectations towards open access. And what we discovered is that when it comes to motivations, most authors actually expect that if they publish a book open access, it will immediately mean that they will get more citations, that there will be more downloads, that they will reach a wider audience. So among authors' expectations, those were the wider dissemination and increased number of citations and downloads. Those were the motivations, the most quoted motivations of them all. And thanks to this study, we actually, thanks to using all these metrics and looking into how we can compare OA books versus non-OA books, we now have, we can show the real and tangible proof of the actual impact of open access on publication. I think that's it from me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Agata. Okay, so it looks like we've got about 9 minutes left for questions. Looks like we had a few sound problems, but I don't see any questions about kind of the webinar content. Does anybody on the line have questions that they would like to type in now at this point? Let's see, and anything? All right, it looks like unless nobody has any questions, let's see.
I'd love to ask Amy a question. This is Lily.
Oh, that would be great.
If she, make sure she's, yep, she's still there.
I'm here.
So I was really, being a librarian, obviously, you know, very excited to hear you talk about this importance of connecting, educating faculty, connecting with librarians, and really kind of a cross-organizational approach. Can you maybe give us any kind of background or insight on struggles in that process? How has that worked, the educating faculty and kind of trying to engage more? And I know obviously the relationship with the library has helped really well.
Yes, what was interesting is we were actually able to take a moment of great concern to our departmental faculty and turn it to a positive. And by that I mean our university is very engaged with academic analytics, and they like to give us little scorecards, and the faculty were incredibly distressed by this. At the same time, we were going through our external department review, and people were very nervous that all this would kind of come together. And so instead of fretting about it, we added some librarians to workshops. We went through and learned how to understand our metrics, how to create even simple things like, you know, a Google Scholar page. And then we turned to Altmetrics and talked about, you know, collecting these alternative ideas of our scholarship. And we, through a departmental meeting, came up with 4 strengths we wanted to emphasize in our external review, which were things like global outreach, being cited by a leader in your field, and a couple other things. And then faculty with library report how to locate that information, both metrics and altmetrics. And it was a really positive experience, leading faculty to say, oh, so we can actually use these things to talk about our own narrative and emphasize the things we want to do. You know, there were resistances along the way because people in our department just didn't want any numbers. You know, that was kind of the thing we kept hearing, no numbers, no numbers. And we kept saying, no, the numbers allow you to tell a story. This is what we do as humanists. And I think about, you know, 85 to 90% of our faculty really bought into that, but it took some negotiation, both from the department head's position, leaders in the department who have been working with various analytics, and also the library coming in and doing some really solid workshops to help people get up to speed. And then when we had our department review, it was incredibly clear that the external reviewers were like, this was great, you all did a good job, we understand what you're doing with metrics. So there was sort of a reward pattern there as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Great, thank you. So I've also got another question or two here. And Lily, maybe these are some questions you can answer since you're, on the altmetric side of things. So what are some sources that are traditionally book focused that altmetric is tracking?
Yeah, we see a lot of mentions in things so I'd say kind of unique sources, Wikipedia, certainly policy and patents, you see monographs mentioned. We do track book reviews as well. So a blog, as Amy was pointing out, and blog attention, I think can be really, really valuable. There's a lot of really engaged, I would say like engaged, targeted, really thoughtful commentary that's happening in the blog world regarding monographs. Um,
Okay.
Also, we track syllabi data from the Open Syllabus project, so you see a lot of canonical influence over time of monographs, especially if you have a catalog going back a ways. And I loved when Amy pointed out that earlier, the idea of a low score not necessarily being something to get disheartened about, but seeing that it kind of as an opportunity. And often, a one or two mentions on a monograph could be indicative of really, really valuable interaction and potential impact. So, I think, that emphasis on connecting the qualitative and quantitative is really important because the number, again, only leads to a story as well. And the number doesn't necessarily have to just be high, that's not the end goal. The end goal is, really engaged, impactful attention, I would think.
Can
Right.
I throw one piece in here?
Please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed as I was looking through Altmetrics for our department is that two of our faculty members have had books that are now, one is 20 years old and one is 30 years old, but Altmetrics picked up references to those books in popular press. One of them was referenced in Slate and the other, I think, in the New Yorker. And so, those are great metrics to find because neither of the faculty members had any idea they were referenced. So they could say, this shows my book is foundational, it's still showing up in popular discussions. And they would have never found that without altmetric kind of intervention because that's not a place that they would necessarily think to look.
That's very interesting. That's a good story to tell. And I think I can really appreciate your point, Amy, about some of this work being foundational. So especially kind of, in the space you're in. I guess the other,
Oh,
sorry?
sorry. There was just another question that came in about sources and social media that I just wanted to follow up with since it relates.
Okay,
Someone
yeah.
just asked if we break up the stats for social media, so Twitter versus LinkedIn, et cetera. Yeah, in Altmetrics, so the badge or the donut that's colorful that you see, each color represents a different source. So light blue will be Twitter, Facebook. We're tracking public Facebook page posts. We also track Reddit, YouTube. Again, there's a variety, Google Plus. So each of those separate social media sources are tracked, and you can get individual counts related to each of those sources as well. I should mention LinkedIn, very important for folks to know. LinkedIn is no longer scrapable in terms of data. They closed their API. So when people share content on LinkedIn, which I know we all do, it can't be captured from an altmetric perspective, unfortunately. We only have historical data for LinkedIn and Pinterest going up to 2015, I believe. And sorry to interrupt, Kathy, back to you.
No, that's perfectly okay. Thank you for catching that question. I do have one more that's come in, and I think after this we'll wrap everything up. Can Altmetric help an organization identify which backlist books to bring back into a print run or print on demand? And I think this question comes up due to what Amy was just talking about with books that were published 20, 30 years ago that are still really popular.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to a lot of publishers who are looking at that kind of data to help them inform things and make decisions about when to, bring things back into print or not print per se. And other, the mention of using patent data and thinking about thematic collections, while it's coming from more based on journal articles, MIT Press runs a batches system where they use altmetric data, or it's a product basically where they're taking various data points, looking at publications from the past around specific topics, and then publishing new new ebooks that are these collections that are, showing again this kind of long-standing canonical expertise in a specific area. So again, this kind of data can definitely help inform those sorts of business decisions as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, doing a collection of kind of your foundational information. Okay. All right. Well, I think now it is 11:30. We are just on the hour mark, so we're going to wrap up. I want to say a big thank you to all of our speakers. Really informative. I know I certainly learned a lot, and thank you to all of our attendees. And after this, give it maybe a day or so. We'll send around a recording of the webinar. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.